Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you so much for tuning into one of our talks today. I'm so excited today to be talking all about the fantastic show, Ellen's Next Great Designer. We have Scott Foley today, who is one of the hosts and also one of the judges on the show, as well as judges Fernando Mastrangelo and Brigette Romanek joining us. And I was really interested in the process in the designers who ended up being part of the show, because the challenges that they're being set are not challenges for beginners. You have to have a certain level of experience, but also because the show is looking for the next great designer, I imagine that there's an experience level where you almost don't want to go beyond it, because then the show isn't doing what it sets out to as its objective. So I was very curious about, what those conversations were behind the scenes, if you know it all or were involved in those, into what the level of expertise for the designers needed to be for the show to work in the format.
I'm not sure that any of us were privy to the conversations with regards to contestants and their qualifications, although I would think Fernando and Bridget, you guys would have a better understanding of, this person's too successful to do this show or has too much experience. I can't speak to that like they might be able to.
No, we weren't privy to anything, but which was so fantastic because we were looking at everything with fresh eyes and a open heart and mind with every piece that we looked at, and knowing that Ellen was behind all of this gave me a real sense of comfort because she's really well known for her love of design. It's a real genuine passion of hers, and I think that the way she went about the show and picking us as judges was just really so genius because we all look at it from a different viewpoint. So it was fresh for us and a new piece for us, just like everyone watching.
I didn't, I think we started talking pretty early in the process. And at that point, they had actually asked me for some recommendations, the production company. And I had done some exhibitions in New York with a lot of emerging designers. I think that was part of why they had asked me to be part of this. But we actually ended up handing over just a list of everyone that we thought would be great. And of course, that's at that emerging level where, if you are to establish, I think it just doesn't make sense for you to do this type of competition show. So we handed them about, I think, 30 or 40 candidates. And from what my understanding is, from having spoken to most of those people since, most everyone got interviewed at least. And so that was really awesome. So I didn't have a hand in choosing, but I definitely, gave a list of people that I thought would be great at that level.
And one of the things that comes forth so much from all three of you in the show is that there's a real sense of gratitude and appreciation. And even if a piece doesn't necessarily speak to you or isn't your taste or wasn't executed the way that you hoped, you're still really engaged and interested in the story behind it and how it came together. Was that something that the three of you discussed in the type of tone and environment you wanted to create for the designers, or did you just naturally find that with each other very early on?
We just found it. We early on, and I think because we all have such a love for design and such an appreciation, that to be an artist or a maker is a vulnerable place, and it is, to be a creator of anything is a vulnerable place because you're putting your work out into the world, and anyone gets to say anything, and irregardless of how it's going to affect you. And so we're just mindful of that because, it's this tough thing where to be a creator is usually it's someone who's sort of sensitive because, they can tune into emotions and feelings and have this sort of, just to be curious into the world and what they're building. It's just really an important, beautiful gift for all of us because they do bring beauty into the world, and who doesn't love beauty? And so I just think it was natural for us to understand and be compassionate and caring. You never want to discourage anyone, and you want to encourage, but you also have to be, tough and tell them what's going on and help them to become tougher in this business and industry. But we're not in it to make someone feel badly or not want to create anymore. That would be absolutely horrible. And we all have had our hands in that, and so we know the feeling as well. So,
for me, I was as a maker, I was watching them, and I couldn't help but put myself in their position. And so, when looking at the pieces, when they have 4 days to create them, that really sunk in when you were seeing the final products, because you're like, wow, so you wanted to, like Bridgette say, you still want to feel encouraged, and you want to say, but you also want to give some value and some criticism and say, these are the things that with time or whatever you could perfect or get better. And I think that's part of it too, is giving them some level of value besides like, we like this or we don't. And then saying, hey, stick to this though, there's something interesting here going on, and feel that encouragement. I think in the industry of design, that is the kind of environment that we're in. It's a very encouraging, very supportive industry. It's strange because the art world is a little bit different than that, and you would think they'd be similar, but the design world is really an encouraging place, and I think that came through on the show.
And the way that you interact with the pieces is really interesting, because there's a lot of physical involvement and that, tacit experience and what that tells you about a piece as well. I feel like Scott may have been the one to interact with the pieces the most in breaking a couple of them. But I was very interested in, what you really learned from a lot of the pieces and a lot of the designs from interacting with them so much, because again, we're only seeing a fraction of the time that you actually spent with these pieces on screen.
Yeah, I mean, you're seeing, I'd say we probably spent 20 to 30 minutes, if not more, on some of these pieces, and listening to the designer talk about it as we would, as I would break it or they would sit on it or whatever it was. And it was, we're not looking at art. It's just not something that you stare at. I mean, they are pieces of art to a degree, but furniture has a function. And in order to get to know that function, you have to interact with it. You have to touch it. You have to feel it. You have to sit on it. You have to look at it. You have to smell it, whatever it is. And that was really important, at least to me. And I know it was, I think I can speak for Fernando and Bridgette. And, you want to interact with these pieces. These pieces are meant to live somewhere, in your home, in an office, wherever. And it's important that you do so.
I also wanted to talk about some of the logistics in the show coming together, because like many other productions, it was impacted by COVID. That was part of the genesis of everybody working in their own studios and then coming out to LA with their pieces. But even down to that, I know that the challenges themselves would actually be given over Zoom, and then you would film the segment of you giving them the challenge in studio when they were there for the judging process. And so what were some of the other spaces in which maybe there was a little bit of a workaround to some of the restrictions that were happening? And how do you feel that some of those actually maybe enhance the show, like the fact that we do get to see their design studios?
Yeah, look, I think that it was tough, right? Unlike any other competition show, we had to deal with COVID during our first season. And most, as you know, whether it's Top Chef or Project Runway, Blown Away, whatever it is, you take all these contestants, you put them in a room, you give them a challenge, and there's drama while they fix or make whatever they're supposed to make. And we didn't have that built-in drama. And the producers came up with a really, I thought, genius way of doing it, which was we'd give the challenges to each designer. So everybody you see on screen, even Alejandro, who was voted out first, he made 6 different pieces. We just didn't get to see them all. He was voted out before we could see them. And we gave them all the challenges. They completed them all. Then we flew each designer and their pieces out to Los Angeles. And then we filmed the connective tissue, which was us judging them, us sending them home, us actually giving them the challenges. And then they put it all together in editing. And I think one of the benefits of doing that, aside from it being a little bit of a cheat and somewhat deceitful to the audience, was that we actually got to see, for the most part, every designer's workspace, where they bring these creations to life. And I think that's really important and something you don't get to see. You don't get to go into Tom Colicchio's home kitchen or his restaurant kitchen, or you don't get to go into, whatever designer's space all the time. Sometimes you do with the finals in Project Runway, but we really got to see where these people live, where they create, and how they do it. And I thought that was really interesting. And from the feedback, maybe you guys can speak to this too. People have loved seeing those spaces.
Yeah, I think it's really what I'm hearing and what is being shared with me is that people love this show so much because you really do get a sincere sense of what these makers and designers are going through, because there's something about being in your own space that's just authentic, because it's just your space. And you can see that designers kind of almost forgot that at different times that they were being filmed, and they're just in their element and they're doing their thing and they're familiar with it, and so it's got a real just really authentic, like I said, a really authentic take on what's happening. And I'm so, in any house I work on, I'm all about the soul of the house, whether it be new or old, or just understanding that. And so getting to see these designers in their space and the soul of where this piece comes from, I think it's absolutely amazing. And you don't really get to do that. It's so cool. So.
And Scott, you were actually going down to everybody's studios and spending a couple of hours filming with them. And I think there's a real tact and art to hosting and to having to go into these spaces where people are in the midst of a really time-sensitive project. The stress levels are incredibly high, and you're kind of like coming in there and trying to pull out a conversation while they're maybe making an entire table and carving up a piece of marble at the same time. So how did you want to approach going into their spaces and thinking about the tone that you needed to walk into and the type of emotion that you needed to hold for them to kind of like keep them calm through the conversation and also to make it work for the show?
I was fortunate in at least in this regard, because I had not met any of the designers prior to going into their space. So we did not have a previous history. So it was easy to go in as, hey, we're both doing this together, like, it's my first time on the show. It's your first time on the show. What are you doing? Talk to me about it. I mean, I had spoken with them on Zoom, sort of giving them their first challenge. So they knew that I was involved, but we'd never met personally. And you always, at least I do, maybe Fernando doesn't, you always want to give off a good first impression, right? And you want to be nice and be sort of wowed by what they're doing. And I'm in awe of, and have great respect for what these people do with their lives. And if I'm being honest, I'm a little jealous that I don't do it myself. So, I go in there with, and lead with that, and wherever it goes, it goes.
And with the three of you in the judging process, the conversations that we do get the opportunity to see on screen, you can really sense the respect that all of you have for each other's opinions and the different ways in which you're all looking at the pieces depending on your experience and the way that it's responded, emotionally within you. Was that a journey to figure out what your dynamic was going to be together and what those deliberations were going to look like? Or did you just find it with each other the first time that you stepped into that room and had to make those tough calls?
We really just found it. There weren't conversations about, we wanted it to be authentic, and it really was. There weren't conversations about, you're going to do this way or I'm going to do, and I think that's part of the beauty of it as well. We really did genuinely feel the way we spoke about with the pieces, and I love that. I love that.
I think we all fell into our roles really quickly because of the way that they cast it was perfectly dynamic. You have Bridgette, who's really going to come to it at times from her client's approach. I was always going to come to it as the sort of more critical maker aspect of it. And you have Scott, who say, hey, I love furniture. I'm educated enough to at least have an opinion about this, and say, so I felt like it really joined, like, the industry, the craft, and the common man. I don't want to say common man, but the approach that maybe
it's fair
that the mainstream who's watching it might attribute to. So I felt like that was created intentionally by the producers, and it just happened to be this kind of kismet thing that it worked out that way on the show.
We would have arguments. I remember, and I think it started actually in the first episode with Mark's piece, but there was a through line for every piece where, after we'd sort of talked about it, after we'd seen the piece, before we talked about it, someone would say, what would you pay for that? And I was always like, I get that IKEA for $400. And both of them be like, that's a $12,000 piece. I was like, maybe $500. We'd have huge discussions. And what you didn't see was that we really cared about not just the designers, but our own opinions. And we fought for what we believed and what we thought about the piece. And we had, I wouldn't say full-blown arguments, but we had intense discussions as to why someone should stay, why someone should go home, why that piece was a piece of shit, why it was not a piece of shit. It was intense, and I think deservedly so. Those designers, those contestants deserved someone to fight for them and fight against them and have opinions. And when you're talking about design, it evokes emotions, and it did for us. And you got to see 30 seconds of a conversation about something, but we went on for
days,
a long time.
Yeah, sometimes coming back to pieces and being like, I don't know, might have not been, fair enough on that, or so, and we were involved. I think we saw how big this could be for their careers, and we were invested during that very short period of time. We were like intensely invested in this thing. So
it's also incredibly challenging to then distill down those conversations that maybe have been a couple of hours into what you're actually going to tell the designers to their faces in the judging process. And you're really having to distill down an entire conversation about their piece into a very short sentence on screen. And so I was very curious, was that something where the three of you would kind of sit together and map out what it was that you wanted the feedback to be? Did the creative team help you in just kind of like finding the words and finding the scripted version of what you wanted to express at all?
Yeah, those were sort of assigned to us, if I'm being honest, at the end, right? Like, I always had to send someone home, which sucked. But they always had to. There was sort of someone at the top. Although there wasn't a winner, there was always, Bridgette would speak to the person at the top and say, "Your designs are great, and this is why you're here." And then Fernando would speak to the person at the bottom and say, "We see you struggling," whatever it was. And then Scott would say, like, "Hey, you gotta F off now." But they would give us a direction. But I think that these guys are both experienced enough that they knew what needed to be said, how to distill it into a bit of a soundbite, and it worked out.
You got to remember, we're kind of rookies on television, Bridgette and I. So they didn't want us to get stuck, especially you get kind of a little bit emotional during the at the end when you have to send someone home. So I remember I got a little, like, okay, designers, I turn a little more robotic or something, and that loosened up as the episodes went on. But when you have to tell someone something very direct in a soundbite, it's something you have to kind of learn. And so I definitely remember in the back them being like, "All right, so what are you going to kind of say?" And I'm like, "Yeah," and coach, and I would practice a little bit and then go on and try to feel more comfortable. But honestly, by the end, I watched the finale and I remember feeling super comfortable by the finale, and I riffed my whatever I said, and I was like, "Oh wow, it came out real natural, really good." And I felt like, okay, now I don't really need the coaching or as much. But
yeah, all the words were our own words, and they just would say like, "Okay, maybe get to this faster," because we might be a little bit like, we're just really sad, So, that little bit, so no words were ever put on us. It was just more so like, okay, come on, you guys.
And there was look, when it came to sending people home, God, the worst part was I had to have like a 16-second break between and the designer going home this week is, and the cameras are rolling, and I'm looking at all the designers, and I'm looking at Fernando, and I'm looking at Bridgette, and you got to hold it so they can film this anticipatory response, and it was just fucking brutal, just brutal.
Yeah. Because you care about everybody,
Of course. And, look, at this point, we've all seen enough reality television that everyone understands what's going on. And everyone knows there's going to be a pregnant pause for effect. But but it's still tough, man, staring at people and not saying anything and someone knowing that they're going home or not going. It was rough.
Yeah.
I mean, off the back of that, I do appreciate in watching the show that it doesn't feel like you're trying to manufacture drama, and tension. It's just the tension is the challenge. It's the work. It's the creativity, but exactly as you said, it is reality TV at the same time. And so there are certain beats and ebbs and flows to it and moments where, maybe we're going to take 20 seconds instead of 2 seconds. Were there other spaces throughout filming the show that there were similar beats that you had to kind of work in a little bit as well?
Yeah. I mean, we couldn't, for filming process, after I'd say light it up, but before we could move to the piece, we had to give a beat so that the cameras could reset, even though we had very specific reactions to the piece we were seeing. So you want to try to hold your reaction or your excitement or disappointment or whatever you're feeling about the piece until the cameras can reset. But it's just such a pain in the butt.
You know what, though? It worked to advantage a little bit because you would get a glimpse of the piece. Okay. And then I personally, like, you want to start coming up with ideas immediately because you don't have that much time when you're on stage to come up with something smart or good, or, you know what I mean? So that I was like, okay, what can
think for yourself? Okay.
Yeah, prepare yourself a little bit so that you could come up with something, at least decent to say. I mean,
one of the hardest things was that the whole time we are talking to the designer and they're telling us about their piece is right to the left of us. And it's not lit up yet, but we can see it. There's lights in the studio. It's 20 feet away from us. And we would do our best, or at least I would do my best, to not look at the piece so that the reaction could be genuine. Now that was tough sometimes because some of those pieces, I mean, I'm thinking specifically about
Erica's green piece, dude. Yeah,
Erica's blow up piece. It's just, I felt like it was going to come eat me if I didn't look at it. But there's some of them are so big, so ostentatious, so over the top that it's tough not to look at it and have an opinion and have a reaction. Yeah. But I think we did pretty good with
we did. And
holding our reactions.
I think we did. And also it was funny because they'd say, hold it, don't talk to each other, don't do anything. Yeah. So it was like, oh, okay. Bursting to get at that piece. And
you've got the producers, we're all wearing earpieces. So you've got the producers speaking to all of us and saying different things to all of us. Like, Fernando, make sure you go in there and what do you really think about this? And Scott, wow, look at how the wood they used. And Bridgette, where would you put this? And, and we're all trying to decipher what they're saying while actually being as genuine as we could to the designers with regards to our feelings, because you want them to to get to know you with regards to their expectations, right? What can I expect from Fernando? What do I think Bridgette's going to say about this, knowing what she's done in the past? So you want to be as genuine as you can, but you also have a responsibility to the show as a whole, making it move along. What's the role I'm going to play here? There's beats that have to be hit. So it was a delicate balance, but I think everybody caught on pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And as much as you get to know each other better and to kind of get a sense of what you're all going to say throughout the process, you're also getting to know the designers more intricately, and you're also getting such a sense of their voice as designers and the way that they tell a story through the pieces that they make. And so how did that evolve the judging process for you, having a little bit more of a sense of them week by week?
Good question.
That's a good question. But for me, I really tried to not let anything influence me other than the direct challenge and what I was expecting of the designers. And so I hope and I feel that I approached each piece individually, and that for me was really important, because otherwise you start to maybe not even thinking about it, but you could start to feel like, oh, I just always like this person's work. And so you're going to look at it with eyes like, I know I'm going to like, and it might influence your judging. And so I think they did a really great job of us not knowing the designers beforehand. I mean, I watched the show, and when I saw Alejandro's family, I was like, oh, geez, so that was really, they did a beautiful job with that, and all of these nuances of making sure we weren't influenced, I thought was really well done. Because when I watch the show now, if I'd have known some of those things, I'd like to believe that I wouldn't have been influenced at all. But seeing like his wife and beautiful kids, I was like, shoot.
It's hard, right? Like it's hard the deeper you go into a show like this, not to have certain expectations from each individual designer, right? And I think that's part of this. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think, we expect certain things, not that you expect more or less,
right,
but you expect a certain baseline from this person or from this person. And if they exceed it, great. If they don't hit it, there's good reason to be disappointed. But, you come in swinging hard one day and the next day not so much, I'm going to be disappointed. Even if this piece is still good, I want it to be better. And I know you can do better. It's, you're like a parent a lot of the times with a kid. Like, that's not like you. That's fine, but it's not like you,
Yeah. And you also felt like when you saw one of the designers walking out, after a period of time, it's like, ooh, I'm excited to see what this one's doing.
Yes.
So, yeah, for sure.
I mean, by the 4th and 5th episode, I feel like you're invested with them as well. And so it's hard not to think of their previous pieces as well, or take that into consideration. I mean, I think that's what we naturally found. And that's kind of what the show discovered, as Ellen was like, hey guys, you need to kind of think about everything that they made. And like, naturally, that's how you think about any kind of creative context in this short way, short period of time. You're like, okay, they just made all of these pieces. What does that mean? Who are they? So naturally, I mean, we're human. That's going to infiltrate. It's going to come into our minds no matter what.
But you also, I remember, and not necessarily with regards to the pieces, but I remember, Erica had sort of an emotional breakdown, the episode that Paul was voted off. Mm-hmm. And I remember being so worried, knowing that the episode where we sent Erica home, I was so worried that there was going to be another emotional breakdown, that I was tensed up waiting for it. And she didn't have it, obviously, as to the same degree. But you get to know these people, and you expect certain things from them, either wrongly or rightly.
Yeah, and you care.
Yeah.
There's also obviously a couple of designs that were much more personal with them designing pieces, Scott for your kids and your family, and Bridgette for your home. And I was interested for both of you, if that adjusted the way that you were thinking about your own personal emotional connection in a little bit of a different way for the process. And even for you, Fernando, how you were then thinking about these pieces and how they would slot into these specific locations of their homes.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think, Bridgette? Was yours, did you look at the finale because it was sort of designed in and for your home? Did you look at those pieces differently?
A little bit I did, yes, because that's what the challenge was, so that was part of my thinking, and how would I want to exist with these pieces? And that's part of what led me to my final decision as well, because that was part of the meat of the challenge, so yeah, it influenced me for sure.
I mean, I thought about my kids when we were looking at the stuff, but I think outside of that, I don't think I judged it any differently. I thought about, like, am I going to lose a kid if they play on this? Like, is someone going to die? Am I going to have to go to the hospital? But aside from that, I didn't really think, and I was correct in most of my assumption, even with the piece that's here. Like, someone might die. We'll see.
I didn't have an emotional connection to, I really, for both of those challenges, obviously it's not my home, wasn't a challenge for my backyard. So no, I guess I could stick a little bit more firmly to just like what I was seeing in terms of, although I will say for the finale, the house has a presence. Okay. So I thought about it so much. I was like, oh my God, I would have probably lost, because my work would have been harder to place into Bridgette's home. I feel like in that context, but because I don't know if that's true or not, but I just thought that. Mm-hmm. And so seeing the work in there, you start to say, oh, wow, this kind of goes really well with the space as well. It seduced us a bit in that way, I think so. Yeah.
And for all of you, with the show coming out and the way that people are responding to it and interacting with it, how do you hope that people start to think about interior design in their homes differently? Whether they're engaging an interior designer and thinking very specifically about pieces that are very much art in their home, or even if they're going to IKEA and buying, build it at home and just thinking about the way in which they want to display items. How do you hope that really evolves the way people think about design in their homes?
Well, there are, interior design is my love and my passion, and every client, it's so different. It's so different when I'm sitting down and we're having a conversation about how they want to function in their home. But, there used to be this idea that items were just beautiful and not really usable. And I think what we showed is that beauty and functionality really can work well together, and you can mix things. You can look at things that might be a little bit unconventional or out of the box. I hope it just expands their way of thinking in the respect that your home really should be a love letter to yourself, and what's important to you. And if you listen to us speaking, it really is us coming from a place of how we want to interact with that piece in our home. And so I just hope it expands people's thinking, like, in a way that insert couch here, it becomes more like, oh, what couch would make me, feel good? Am I going to like laying on this couch where, and just opening themselves up that way and enjoying their home more. Not just a place to sort of sleep and eat, but a place to really enhance you as a human being.
I saw it a little bit like the way that we are becoming more connected to the way that we eat. Like, we're looking for farm food, we're trying to go local, we're trying to understand that stuff. And I think that this gives an opportunity for people to start connecting with even the furniture that you have or that you buy. If you can afford to go out and buy these unique objects, like, to learn about the process and the people that are making the stuff that you're living with makes you a little bit emotionally connected to the stuff, instead of it being just an IKEA thing or something, right? So I think as a culture, we're kind of moving towards that a little bit more. And I think furniture is playing a part in that, because home is becoming such an important factor, especially post-pandemic. So I think it was kind of a beautiful time for people to see that, and also to see the amount of work that it takes and why these things are priced the way that they are, because they're not being manufactured out there. So if you're, to see that exposed, I think opens up people's ideas as, oh, okay, that's why these are collectible items, or why they're at this price points. You see that and you can understand. And I think the show did an amazing job of exposing that. So
I agree. I think there's a beauty to furniture that a lot of people take for granted. Whether it is an IKEA piece, which can be beautiful but can also be fucking horribly ugly and shitty made, or whether it's a Ligné Rosé sofa, whatever it is, there is a beauty to it, and you can mix and match, and you can find things, and I hope that this show puts that in a bit of a brighter light, and gives people a perspective as to if I'm furnishing a new house or I want to make a change in a room, like, there are options out there and reasons for different prices, different materials, all that stuff. And I think that we showed that with this show. And I think if we get the chance to do a few more seasons, that people will really pay attention to that, and it'll matter. And it'll become a conversation, even more so than it is now, when you walk into someone's home and you see something that's beautiful to you, and maybe they don't see it that way, but it was just a couch, but you're like, no, look at the lines there, and that's why it's like this. And there's conversations to be had, and it's a way to bring people together.
Well, I really loved watching the dynamic between the three of you, and hope that we get more episodes to enjoy that, and really appreciate you all sharing so much behind the scenes of making the show. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. It was a pleasure.